next speaker is Mel Breitbarth. She is originally from Metamora, Illinois, and her college and career goals include writing a book series and becoming a criminal profiler. Her favorite TED Talk was Sir Ken Robinson's How Schools Kill Creativity. So, come on up, Mel. Welcome.
Right, hello everyone. That was a really good talk, by the way. He had a really good posture. He's wearing a suit for Pete's sakes. He's awesome. I have a question. Why was that speech so effective? It was very effective, but why? I'll tell you. The reason that speech was so very effective was because of your own ability to be affected by it. That seems kind of obvious, duh. Mel, why are you talking about this? Bear with me. Humans have an incredible capacity to be affected by the world around them, by what they can sense, what they can feel, what they can imagine, what we can think of. In fact, the only people who don't seem to be very receptive towards the world around them are psychopaths, who, as psychologist Scott A. Bond points out, appear to have a genetic predisposition towards being emotionally unaffected by the world around them. Even sociopaths appear to have become who and what they are because of early childhood traumas, an extreme reaction towards being affected. Throughout this speech, I hope to inform you about not only the different types of affectedness and how strongly we really are affected by the world around us, but also the personal benefits toward being affected. Ready to get started? Everybody good? Awesome, let's get started. Another question. Did you know butterflies are legally blind? They actually are, by human standards. You see, this is a question that Casey Itterall wrote about in her ASU's Ask a Biologist website, in which she goes on to explain in intense detail how butterflies' eyesight works. The part that I find most interesting is that even though butterflies are legally blind by human standards, they can actually see more colors than we can. Can you imagine that? There are actually colors in the world that we can't see. We think that we can see everything, apparently we can't. This is very interesting because it not only brings in how we can be affected by the senses, by what we can see, bright, beautiful colors, or not see in this case, but also by what we can be affected by in idea form. Can you think about that? What would a color look like that you can't see? I do think, however, that more people are strongly affected by emotions than they are by any other type of being affected. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. We don't all share the same beliefs and ideas, but we all tend to share the same feelings. We tend to react very similarly to certain stimuli. For instance, another psychologist, Paul C. Hollinger, wrote in his What is Anger, Part 1 article, he says that not only is anger a sort of SOS sign telling us that something is wrong, but it's also highly contagious. I'm sure you've all seen this. You're in the cafeteria, you got the two kids over there, and they're talking about, oh, my stupid ex did this, and the other kid's getting angry with them. Oh, yeah, they shouldn't have done that. What's wrong with them? Mob mentality, I'm sure we've all noticed that anger can be passed on very easily from one person to another. And it's not just anger, it's any emotion. It is love, it is hope, it is sadness, depression. Any emotion you can put your finger on. So that brings in another question. How strongly are we affected by the world around us? I, for example, have been called a psychopath on more than one occasion by my friends, because I tend to be a little less emotionally affected by things. I'm a little bit more logical than most people would like to be. But I do actually consider myself to be more of a philosopher. I'm very strongly affected by ideas. I love ideas. Apparently I'm not the only one. In my favorite Plato work, The Symposium, he goes on to explain how he and a couple of his friends had an interesting conversation with a Greek orator, statesman, and general named Alcibiades, a very powerful man, who explains, himself, he admitted this, that he was so strongly affected by the ideas of the great philosopher Socrates, Plato's tutor, that he not only stalked the poor man for who knows how long, but actually offered to sleep with him if he would agree to tutor him. He didn't. I can't imagine why he wouldn't want to sleep with the stalker. I don't know. Now, I don't think I'd go quite that far for a good idea, but I do think this is a pretty good example of how strongly we can be affected by good ideas floating around us and by the people who present them to us. Unfortunately, I still do think that more people are very strongly affected by emotions, probably more than anything else, possibly negative emotions being the worst. For example, if you want a horrible example of human cruelty, look up Dwight D. Murphy's article, Revisiting the Good War's Aftermath, in which you will find case after case after case after case of insane human cruelty in and around the time of World War II. the worst of which, in my personal opinion, were the rape crimes in Berlin after the war was over, mainly because these horrible crimes targeted 3 groups of people in particular: children below the age of 12, the elderly, particularly the disabled, and extremely poor women, all 3 of whom would have had no say in the Third Reich's movement to begin with. All of these crimes in the name of rage and empowerment. Clearly, humans are extremely strongly affected by the world around them. So why is my good idea to be more affected by the world around us? Why shouldn't I be saying we should be less affected to try and prevent these things? Well, bear with me, I have one more example, and I think you'll understand where I'm coming from. You see, I had a cousin named Charlie who was the most incredible human being on the face of the planet, quite possibly. He was an extreme altruist and excruciatingly kind human. He would listen to everyone, try to understand where they were coming from, what was bothering them, what he could do to help them. He was a police officer, the kind that any force would be very proud to have serving them. He believed more strongly in the phrase, to protect and especially to serve, than he did the annual arrest quotient. He was incredibly kind. He was the one that they would listen to when he went to bars that told them, okay, you've had enough, you can put the glass down now. And he would drive home anyone who was afraid to go home alone at night. He was incredibly kind. And then he died. At 2:00 a.m., Christmas Eve morning, 2011, my cousin Charlie had an accident, a work accident brought on by his type 1 diabetes, which I also have, which cost him his life instantly. It was devastating, not only for myself, but for all of my family, for his mother and father who loved him incredibly, for his Aunt Janny, who had lived with them when Charlie was born and had helped to raise him when he was a baby, to his younger sister, who loved him dearly no matter how many times he pranked her or tried to throw her away in the garbage can because he didn't want a sister, to her son, his nephew, who would have been celebrating his first Christmas that year. It was incredibly devastating for all of us. For quite some time afterwards, that was about all it was depression. After the celebrating for the holidays was over, we held his funeral and his visitation. We were expecting it would be something very small, very quick. He was only 26 years old. He wasn't famous. You know, how many people could show up? Maybe a couple people here and there, a couple hours. That visitation lasted for 4 hours with over 500 people showing up. And each and every one of them with a story to tell of a time he had listened to them, had been open to who they were, to what they were going through, and had tried to help them through his newfound understanding of them. What I'm trying to get at here is that the benefits of being affected by the world around us far outweigh the costs. I know this is true in my own life. Going into criminal psychology, I have to be open to and strongly affected by the worst of humanity in order to make any difference in the lives of the people around me. And it's not just for psychologists either. It's also for just anyone, even writing a business report. You still have to have a very keen understanding of what's going on to have a really effective report, something that actually makes a difference in your company. Now, what I would suggest for this is actually quite simple. You can do this whenever you want to. It costs nothing. Notice things. Consciously make an effort to notice things in the world around you. It can be a color, an idea, a feeling. Allow it to affect you. You don't have to allow it to overcome you, just allow it to affect you. And turn the energy you get from it into a positive action or reaction to something in your own lives. And please remember, be effective by being affected. Thank you.